Howdy, howdy all. Thank you very much for stopping by to take a closer look at this watch today. In hand, we have ourselves a Seiko Prospex, nicknamed the Samurai, reference SRPD23, a part of the Save the Ocean line, and this particular variant is known as the Great White. And before we jump a little bit further into it, I just want to go over some brief historical points about the Samurai and the Save the Ocean line. So, back in 2004, Seiko released the Samurai in a slightly different case dimension with titanium and stainless steel available on release. And the nickname Samurai is a bit contested as the hands used during that time gave off the appearance of samurai swords, apparently, and, and the case itself had a lot of angularity to it and gave it a very distinct design that gave it the nickname Samurai, but it's hard to say exactly for sure which one it is specifically and how the origin of the name came about, but nonetheless, the name Samurai stuck ever since. And the Save the Ocean line initially was released in 2018 with a Seiko Solar Tuna, that one being referenced SNE 518. And since then, there have been a number of Save the Ocean models. Perhaps it's Seiko's most notable line in today's uh, current market for Seiko. And this variation, the Save the Ocean, the Great White, is the fourth variation of that line. Um, when it initially came out, there were three models. There was a turtle, a solar chronograph, and this samurai that we're seeing here today. And all of them have a same dial, same bezel, and on the counterweight for the seconds, they all carry the same shark fin motif that we'll take a closer look here in just a moment. And to move on to the next bit, to get the dimensions out of the way, we're looking at a case size of 48 millimeters, but an effective wearing ability of 53 due to the protrusion of the end links that you can see here, making it about 53 millimeters effectively on the wrist, and then a thickness of 13 millimeters with a distance of 46.5 millimeters, including the crown, which for the samurais is a little bit large, and a lug width of 22 millimeters. So rest assured, if you do want to get rid of the bracelet and switch it out for something else, you can have plenty of options for doing such. But now, moving on specifically more about the watch. You can see here plenty of angularity, again, as stated before about the case. And with the case, you can see that there's not really too much in the way of finishing differences. You have more or less two parts of finishing. You have these brushed parts on the lugs, and then you also have a high gloss finish on this midsection of the case that you can see all throughout the watch. Even on the crown, you can kind of see a little bit of that high gloss coming through in between the crown guards and the crown itself. Case, or actually the bracelet, very much the same story. You have high gloss in the center on these fold over deployment, and then for the most part, everything else is brushed except for these small little bits right here, which are going to be high polish. But for the most part, you're kind of getting a pretty cohesive look of the watch overall. Sizing of these ones are not too bad, held in by Seiko's typical pin and collar system, and you have 4 points of micro adjust in the clasp, so if you need to get that perfect fit, you have the ability to do so. And on the flip side here, also comes with the Seiko Divers extension. Now, these are, for me at least, difficult to get on and off, so if you're able to get it off, sweet. If you don't, then, well, it's there, but good luck trying to use it, in all honesty. But coming now more towards the actual dial and bezel of the watch, the thing that makes this model stand out from the other Save the Oceans is the bezel and again, dial. But what makes this particular model so special is the bezel inlay itself is entirely different than what Seiko has done before for really any other model outside of the Save the Ocean line. The bezel on here has these concentric grooves inlaid into there that give it a much more dynamic look in person than your typical aluminum bezel. So that's one of the nicest parts about this watch, in my opinion, is the bezel, and that does make it stand out the most. Unidirectional 120 click with the Lume pip there at 12 o'clock, and then you have this kind of grayed out section for the first 15 minutes. Oh, sorry, the first, yeah, 15 minutes here. And for the most part, the feel of it is actually fairly nice. It does feel a bit better than some of the other aluminum bezels from the Samurai series, but it's not all that outstanding compared to other models in the Seiko line. Once you move a little bit further into the dial, you can see a blue rehaut there, and then the dial itself is, well, pretty emblematic of an ocean, but in this particular case, it is nicknamed the Great White, not only because of that counterbalanced second hand that I talked about earlier with that shark fin motif there, but also at the 8 o'clock position on all of the models in the Great White line, if you will, you have a small shark fin that appears to be coming out of a wave top like that. So it's a pretty nice and a very small little subtle nod to a difference of name, as the ones previously just had kind of a wave pattern dial, so it does give it a bit more character than the previous ones, but for the most part, it honestly is a bit bland. I mean, it is a bit of a high sunburst dial, but it's not too shiny, so you don't get too much reflection in the sunlight when you wear it, which is a good thing, but at the same time, it really isn't all that dynamic besides the inlay and design of the wave there. But for the most part, you're going to be seeing pretty much the same exact dial layout on all the Samurai lines. So you have pretty good indices filled with Lume, which we'll check out right now. So looking at the Lume in the dark here, you can see that it actually has a fairly decent amount of Lume Bright applied to all the indices. Again, having that Lume pip at 12 o'clock gives you the ability to get a bit of reference point if you need to time something, or hell, if you're actually going to go on a dive, which most likely you're not, but if you need to time a movie or time food on a grill, I guess this works pretty well. And it glows, again, a good green color because of that Lumen Bright. It does last for a few hours from what I've experienced, but for the most part, it's definitely not going to be a flashlight in comparison to some other Seiko models, so the Lume is fair, but it could be a little bit better. You'll have a date here at 3 o'clock position. These predate the King Samurai, so no Cyclops and no Sapphire Crystal. And you can also see that the hands on here very much do mimic the monster hands because, well, they are. But what's nice about this particular one as compared to some other Samurai models is the hands on this are of a matte finish. Now, matte finish is good for this particular dial because, again, it is a bit of a sunburst effect, so you do have a bit of light coming back at you if you bring it out into the sun. But for the most part, it makes the watch very legible because you don't have these double shine effect of the hands and the high gloss reflecting at you on top of the dial. It makes it a lot more legible and a lot easier to read and pretty much look at. So that's one positive thing about this particular model that I enjoy of this Samurai. But coming back out a little bit further now to the crown, you can see a bit of a larger crown, and you do have a lot of knurling to it, which gives the Samurai a bit more of a distinctive look than, say, the turtles that have a different crown. But for this one in particular, it does screw down and have winding. The movement inside of here is the 4R35, looking at 41-hour power reserve and a 3 hertz beat rate. So not the fastest in the world, but it gets the job done. Setting for the time, you can see that the seconds hack. And what I like about this particular model is that with one wind of the crown to set the time, you can see how much of the seconds or of the minutes and hour hands move. It basically advanced an entire 2 hours from just one turn of the crown, which I enjoy because some other models don't have that much, um, I guess, giving of the time. If you go to change it, you can have to change maybe every 30, 45 minutes, but this gives you the ability to change the time rapidly. And one other cool effect about the samurai is, or actually even the monster too, is the little rocket you can kind of make when the minute hand passes right over the hour hand. You can get that little bit of a rocket ship effect. A little fun, but also a little stupid. Another aspect that's nice about here is the quick second or the quick adjust for the date works well and is pretty smooth, not too loud. Some other date changes on watches are pretty noisy, but for thankfully this one in particular, it isn't all that bad. Screw down crown once again, and about 3 screws you can be able to get the crown fully seated in. With this one, as you can read on the dial, 200 meters of water resistance, so if you need to take it out into the ocean, you're fine. But honestly, these are probably going to be living on the wrist of people who are at their desks majority of the day, so there's that. Notice that the bezel's a little bit off, but at the same time, that's how you know it's a true Seiko if it has a little bit of a misalignment. Case back here, nothing too special, nothing too great. It basically just gives you notice that it's a special edition, but for the most part, you're kind of seeing the same case back that you would on any other Samurai model. You have the Hokusei Wave and the Prospex logo with all the writing on the periphery like that. So nothing too special about that, but there that is. So for the most part, I'm going to get into a bit more of my personal breakdown of the watch and kind of give it my own personal score because don't get me wrong, it's a great watch. It does the job well, but there is some things that give it a little bit of a lacklustrous, or basically a little bit lacklustrous for the most part. So to rate it out, I give the comfortability of the watch about a 7 out of 10. I do think the watch, for me at least, wears well. I have a 6.25 inch wrist, and it wears large, but it's not so overbearing that it looks clunky or clownish. I personally enjoy the way it looks, and I kind of enjoy the weight to it, so there's that. The design of it, I also enjoy. I love the Samurai line, and I'll give it a 7 out of 10. Legibility, I think, is phenomenal. Again, due to the matte finish on the hands, which make the watch stand out so much better in sunlight. And for recommendability, or actually, sorry, legibility, again, I'll give an 8. Recommendability, if someone were to come to me and ask me if they should get this watch, I'd honestly give it a 6 out of 10. It's a bit lost in the noise of all the other Seiko models, honestly. And with the Samurai model in particular, there's plenty of other Samurai variations. So this particular one, unless you're honed in on the look or you're a Seiko collector, then you really don't need to have this watch or really look over it. It's a good watch, but it again gets lost in the rest of the noise. So 6 out of 10. The quality of this one for the price point I think is fairly well. 7 out of 10 for it. Feels nice, build quality's there, and for the most part it's kind of in line with the rest of the price categories that you see in the market. And then what I would consider the flexibility, or what other watch nerds would kind of think about this watch, not too great. Honestly, I'd give it about a 4 out of 10. It's kind of lacklustrous. Again, it gets lost in the rest of the noise of the other Seiko Samurai models. It doesn't really stand out. The really only thing that gets this watch going above all the other Seiko Samurai models is that bezel. But if you don't care about the bezel, then it's just another Seiko Samurai. So altogether, I give it about a 39 out of 60, which places it at a relatively okay position in comparison to other models of what I've reviewed on the channel so far. So I think, it works, it's fine, but it's definitely not the best. And if you are looking for a Seiko Samurai model, there are some newer ones. I'd say go for the Kings. And if you really want to go for the Save the Oceans, I still recommend going for the King Samurai models. But for the most part, thank you for stopping by. This has been another episode, and hope to see you all in the near future.